Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. If you don't know, I just got off a 2 week break from YouTube where I was banned. Had some videos removed. I mentioned that last video, and I'm mentioning it again. And yeah, I got my second strike. They removed 3 more videos of mine, and I thought I was being careful, but I wasn't. In any case, so yeah, I'm my 2 week ban is over, and uh this video is in response to Kanye West's attack on the Jewish people. And I don't have to respond obviously, but I feel like I want to. It's part of my nature to speak out against um I don't know, people at the top, I guess. I've always been this way. I've always been rebellious and kind of an underdog, um wanting to challenge authority, so to speak. And I like Kanye West. I think he's really one of the standout people in modern culture. He's independent. He thinks for himself, and that's all very admirable. I do think he was a little short-sighted in his recent attacks on Jewish people. I can understand some of his experiences may not be great, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around that. But and I'm going to address Kanye West's claims directly, and I don't expect Kanye West to watch this video, but if he does, then great. Uh, but I think in general, I think a lot of people will tend to have some confusion about this topic. I've seen it again and again, and obviously not everyone. Some people are able to, who are not Jewish, who are able to empathize enough to be able to understand what it might be like from the Jewish side of things, if you are Jewish. But a lot of people are not. They're not Jewish, and then they don't really have the empathy to understand, right? I see this comment, and they always, say, "Well, we can't criticize the Jews." Well, I mean, first of all, you don't know the Jews. I mean, there's 15 million of us, and you don't know all of us. And you might know a few, but that's the limit of your experience, and it's ignorant every single time when you try and criticize a group, because the group is not a monolith. No group is. You can't just criticize Black people or Asian people or Indian people or Hispanic people, because there's millions and millions of them, and you don't know that. Like the smallest percentage of them. Well, let me start from the beginning. So my background is, and I mentioned this in the last video, and forgive me if this is not your cup of tea, obviously skip it, just ignore it, right? I feel the need to express this. And it's not my cup of tea either. Like, this is not really comfortable for me to talk about. It's a very sensitive topic, but I feel it's worth having the conversation, because otherwise you just get a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. So, and this is essentially something like part 2 of the first video I made, which is called The Jewish Question, but I left out this part, and this is another video. So anyway, my mother's mother especially, but my mother's parents survived the Holocaust in Europe, in Hungary. My grandfather, who was born a Christian, we believe, since he was an orphan, we're not 100% sure, but we believe he was Christian. He managed to fake papers for my grandmother, who was Jewish, and they survived. However, my grandmother's family, most of them were captured by the Nazis and murdered. And that's fact. Some survived, but most did not. So this is very close to home. I grew up with war stories from my grandparents, telling me about how they survived the Holocaust. And it still wasn't easy. I mean, there was a death warrant out for my grandfather. He had to hide. He was a traitor to the Communist Hungarian Party at that time. And they still had to escape. And they escaped. They went to Israel after the war, as soon as they could, but they were captured by the British and held in the Cyprus British prison camps, which they made a movie out of, Exodus, with Paul Newman. And my mother was born in a British prison camp, literally in there, and she grew up in Israel, and then they came to the United States. So I'm directly impacted by all of this. And the thing that really bothered me about what Kanye West said, I mean, he said a lot of stuff. I didn't listen to it all because it's very uncomfortable for me to hear all this ridiculous nonsense blaming the Jewish people when he's talking about like a few people. And he wants to blame all 15 million of us for what he knows is like how many Jewish people, like, I don't know, even if he knows 100 Jewish people, like big deal. There's literally like, I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of people. He's it's just ignorant. Like, you can't talk about whole groups of people like that. That's why anytime you say like the black people, the Jewish people, the Asian people, you're ignorant. Like, you're flat out, like, whatever follows there is almost certainly going to be something that's completely ignorant because you don't know them. Like, you can make, like, there are, I mean, certain generalizations, but you have to be very careful and accurate with your assessment of those huge generalizations. But when you're going off like Kanye West did, the Jewish people, blah, 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 that's false. I mean, I can understand why he's saying these things because the Jewish people are overrepresented in media and Hollywood and a lot of other areas, which I covered in my last video. So I'm not going to really cover this time. So that, I mean, that is something that we need to continually look at and understand why. But mind you, the Asian people are the most demographically the most successful, and this is just a statistic. I mean, I'm not talking about like, you know, the vague generalizations about Asian, like stereotypes. That's not a stereotype. Asian people are statistically the most successful. They make the most money. So I mean, like, there's this idea running through society that the more rich a person is, the less compassion and empathy that we should have for them. Like, the Jewish people are rich, therefore, who cares if they suffered and died and tortured and, you know, victims of genocide? Like, who cares? Only the people who are statistically poor deserve our compassion and empathy, which is, I mean, that's a lack of empathy. That's a lack of humanity. You're cutting yourself off from your humanity when you hold that stance. It's a really ignorant view and it's inaccurate. Like, everyone who suffers deserves empathy. And I mean, you know, it's just one factor. If you look at the modern success of the Jews, there's many factors. They've been, you know, historically one of the most abused, you know, race, religion, ethnicities, however you want to categorize them. You know, everyone wants to argue about the Jews as if they know, you know, that they're experts. Like, everyone thinks they're an expert on the Jewish people. I've heard all sorts of stuff from people who are not Jewish about who the Jews are and who the Jews aren't. And it's like all ridiculous. And I don't claim to be an authority, but you actually have to study these things in depth and detail, and with a lack of bias, with just trying to get to the bottom. Anyway, the thing that I really wanted to talk about in this video is that, and I'm going to share my screen because I don't want to. I want to directly quote Kanye West on this one. Kanye West doubles down on anti-Semitic tropes, rejects invitation to Holocaust Museum. So apparently the Holocaust Museum invited him after some anti-Semitic tropes. And he says, I want you to visit Planned Parenthood. That's our Holocaust Museum. Yeah. And I just want to quote one more thing before I go back to full view. Blah, blah, blah. It's not what I'm looking for. Sorry. With the darker Jews, the 12 lost tribes of Israel, who we are, because we're Jewish also. We're from Africa also. Now, this is wrong. There are black Jews, but not all black people are Jewish. And in the Jewish diaspora. This is something which I've looked into. I'm not I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I have studied this. The Jewish diaspora, which means the spreading out of the Jewish people from Israel. Jews went into all over the Middle East. Not a lot of people know this, but but at the time of the creation of Israel, there were nearly 1 million Jews throughout the Middle East who got expelled from the whole Middle East. And they were second-class citizens anyway. Most people don't realize that, but they were not treated well by the Muslim nations. They were considered people of the book, and they were charged an indiscriminate tax just for being Jewish. And they lost all their land and money and possessions, and were forced out of their country into Israel. So a lot of Jews came from the Middle East. That was their home, and they were forced into Israel against their will. There were Jews in Northern Africa and Ethiopia. There were Jews in India. There were Jews in China. And yes, there were Jews in Europe. And the reason this all makes sense is because, I'm going to stop sharing. Who would elect to be Jewish? Most Jews converted out of pressure to Christianity or whatever, and sometimes secretly kept being Jewish because they were persecuted. Jews were always persecuted for being a minority, a successful minority, right? A real minority, like meaning like really low in number, like compared to the nations that they were living. They were spread out from Israel, and they had to live in foreign nations, and they were always the minority, but they kept their religion. And so that's the telling point. Yeah, there are fake Jews, apparently. I mean, that's what I'm being told. But who would, if not for more devious reasons, who would elect to be a discriminated minority? I mean, that doesn't really make sense. Most Jews who don't have tremendous wealth and power, who only have the Jewish religion, it makes no sense that they would convert to Judaism and face horrible discrimination and be minority, right? That's just any case. We know the Jews were spread out, and there are black Jews. There are black Jews in Israel. There are black Jews in North Africa. Probably not many, but I think the largest percentage population of Jews are in Iran, if I'm not mistaken. There's still about 10,000 left, and in the rest of the Middle East, there's like none, because the Muslims basically, after they're pretty, not to cast any negative light on, but they don't really want outsiders there. They want it to be 100% Muslim. They're pretty much monoculture in a lot of these Islamic countries. In any case, so those two things, blacks are not Jews. There are some black Jews, but blacks in general are not Jews. You can't just say, I have black skin, I'm a Jew. No, that's rejected. Kanye West. I'm calling you out directly in case you didn't notice. Like, I don't care how many billions of dollars you have. You're not going to lie and get away with it. I'm not going to lie about me, because you are directly talking to me when you're talking about the Jewish people, because that technically is me, even though I'm not religious. But in any case, Planned Parenthood, comparing Planned Parenthood to the Holocaust is not an accurate comparison. It's not accurate in any way, because I mean, number one, everyone knows somebody who's gotten an abortion. I can understand, and I agree with you generally, if you're not comparing something as grievous as the Holocaust to Planned Parenthood. I agree that the Black community is targeted, and I think that's an issue, and I think you're right about that. And Candace Owens has spoken about that, and she's right about that too. They do target the Black community, and I've always been on that side of thing, like a supporter of that view that the Black community is targeted with Planned Parenthood and other ways and means. And I'm a full supporter of that issue. I think that's terrible and awful. However, you don't need to compare it to the Holocaust because the two are completely different. Even if the Black community is targeted, still, they're not being forced. They might be coerced, but they're not being forced. You have women willingly going and getting abortions. And, I don't care. Like, I don't even, like, there's no way. It's not even a close comparison. It's highly offensive, in fact, to say that a woman going willingly getting an abortion is the same as having your family, your friends, everybody you know in your community being forced into a ghetto, demonized, told lies about, have your business destroyed, beaten up regularly, and then hunted down like dogs, captured, enslaved, beaten, tortured, starved, worked to death, and then slaughtered. And then watching that, I mean, you just have to not have a bias. Anyone could see that this is not a hard thing to understand. It's very, very simple. If you have your family and your friends forcefully dragged into concentration camps where they're beaten, shot, starved, worked to death, enslaved, tortured, and then ruthlessly slaughtered, and then thrown in mass graves after their skin and bones. I mean, that is I've known people, everyone's known somebody who has had an abortion. Almost everyone knows somebody. And it's the women, yeah, it's like, oh, that's really sad. But they are, I shouldn't have to say this, but it's just a really shitty comparison. Like, just take the Jewish thing out of the way and just imagine somebody, having your family having that happen to them. And you can understand that there's a huge difference between willingly aborting a child that you've never even seen before. There's no bond, there's no love bonds there. I understand the connection between an unborn child and a mother. Like, it's sad, but when it's your family, and you've known them for decades, and friends and loved ones, and it's completely different. Like, I shouldn't have to explain this, but like, that's just a really, really, really fucking awful comparison. It's incredibly hurtful and incredibly ignorant. So, I mean, I wish I could get this message to you and you could reflect on that. That's not the same at all. Not even close. And I have sympathy and compassion and empathy for the plight of the Black community. I'm not at all diminishing that, but we don't have to diminish each other. You do not gain, credits for diminishing the Jewish people. You do not get more empathy and compassion for the Black plight by diminishing the Jewish people. Just stop comparing it. It's not the same at all. Like, we don't have to compare. Like, I'm not saying that the Jewish people had it harder than the Black people. Obviously, going way back, to slavery, that was, but we don't have to compare. I don't want to diminish anything. It's just, we don't have to compare. That's the whole point. Like, stop comparing. And if you're invited to the Holocaust Museum and you don't want to go, just politely decline. But you don't have to be like, oh, we have our own Holocaust. No, you don't. That's not, having women willfully having abortions is not a goddamn Holocaust. It's just not. And so that's my point. And if anyone disagrees, they're just not being honest. It's just not the same. So, and it's really hurtful. It's really hurtful. I mean, because I really like Kanye West, and I like a lot of what he says, and I think we're all individuals, and I don't think any of us should have to conform to some standard. I hate it when people are like, oh, you're Black, you have to think like this. Like, I wish every single Black person would would reject that notion and stand up and just be who they are, because we're all individuals. But at the same time, like, you can't do that to Jewish people. Jewish people are like, blah, blah, blah. No, we're not. You don't know me, and you don't know any of the 15 million Jewish people. You know a handful. Like, so, you know, yeah, I could get really crude here, but I want to be polite about it. Like, that's ignorant. You don't know all the 15 million Jews, so you cannot put us in your little stereotype. Yeah, Jews are overrepresented, but that's not me. Like, I'm pretty damn poor. I have like $200 in my bank account. I'm like one step away from being homeless. Okay. So, like, I've been told, if I talk about the Jew, like somebody said, oh, you're paranoid. I'm not paranoid. People are actually talking about Jews in a negative way, and they say, oh, you can't criticize the Jews. Well, you can criticize the Jews, but it's ignorant too, because you don't know the Jews. There's a lot of us, and you don't know it. Nobody knows all of us. Nobody knows all of any group. And you're always ignorant when you're stereotyping groups, because you don't know all of the people. So it's always ignorant. So yeah, when people call you out for stereotyping Jews, that's correct. And when, if you get called out for stereotyping Black people, it's also the same. You're also, whoever calls out somebody for stereotyping Black is also correct. Like, nobody should stereotype people like that. You don't know all the people in the group, so don't do it. It's ignorant. It's ignorant every time with every group. It's always ignorant. And if you do that, you're ignorant. And it's just flat like that. Like, stereotype people, you're ignorant. You're an ignorant dumbass. So don't do it. Don't be such a stupid, ignorant jerk. It's simple. Just control yourself. Have self-control. Talk about your own experiences. You can talk about your own experiences. I know so-and-so, and they did this and that. That's fine. So what? Like, that's your experience. It's not the whole Jewish people. It's not me. It's not any of the Jews I know. It's not any of the 15 million Jews that you don't know. So just talk about the people that you know and your experiences. And if everyone did that, things would be much better. And we could stop this divide, this crazy divide. That's like, we don't need to have this turf war or whatever you're calling it, because that's ignorant. I can't stand for it, and I will call you out again and again and again. I don't even give a shit. Like, I will say it. Whatever needs to be said, I will say it. So I hope this message gets to you somehow, and I hope you can reconsider, and let's all come together. We don't need to have these kind of fights or wars or anything. And yeah, there are some successful Jews, but a lot of Jews are just normal, regular people, middle class. And there are some poor Jews, like myself. I'm a poor Jew. I've known other poor Jews. It does happen, and there's not that many of us. You're Jews in general, so you're not going to see a lot of poor Jews, because there's just not that many Jews. But in any case, that's all I got for right now. And I'm going to make some more astrology videos very soon, so don't worry about that. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, for whoever did listen, and take care. All right, bye.